dear colleague, Dr. Lynn Crawford, who is a professor of project management at the University of Sydney in Australia. She's going to tell us about governance in OPM, how to improve performance, but being from Australia, she'll probably tell us north, south, southwest presentation, a different type of approach maybe to the American approach. So, Lynn, please.
Firstly, I would like to congratulate Dr. Alhamdi and his team, his committee, on the way that you put together this session. Because John Quirk, who I assume is an Australian.
Australian, New Zealand.
Yeah, well, I did think that you hadn't said my name. If you'd said Lynn, I would have known that you were a New Zealander. But as an Australian, and Australia and New Zealand are always friends when facing anyone else other than each other. That I was delighted to hear that. And John has talked to us about mega, super, galaxy projects with a focus on governance. And absolutely consistent, has told a lot of my story for me, so I'll be able to move quite quickly through quite a lot of that. And then Claudia has talked about organisational project management capability, so has focused on that. What I'm going to do is bring them both together. The green, oh, thank you. So what I'm going to do is bring them both together, because as far as I'm concerned, governance, good governance is essential, and it is supported in the world of projects by good organisational project management capability. But at the same time, organisational project management capability, the ability to deliver projects, to deliver strategy, is supported by good governance. So there's a synergy in that. So what I'm going to talk about is the challenges of major projects, whether they be mega, super or galaxy, about this, the nature of corporate and project governance, because it's not just about project governance, there is an umbrella of corporate governance that we have to take into consideration, the role of organisational project management capability in supporting governance, and then I'm going to provide some evidence from research into practice, which was part of a large Project Management Institute research study on the value of project management. Now, the challenges of major projects, which John Quirk touched upon with very much a highlight on the stakeholders. These major projects, and Galaxy and so on, are very much subject to public scrutiny and media attention. And both public and private organisations are very concerned about that. They are also subject to diverse stakeholder perspectives. Different people have different views. Different powerful people have different views on them. There are multiple contractual arrangements, competing commercial interests, very diverse expectations from all of the stakeholders, and they take a long time, so the world changes, impacting the projects. In responding to these challenges of major projects, the effective response, and I thought John just described that beautifully in practice, requires accountability, it requires transparency and traceability. Very large projects are often subject to scrutiny, to inquiries, and you need to have everything in place for that. Compliance and control. I love the idea of verified bankable. There has to be verified bankable ability to deliver. It's important to deliver value for money. And very importantly, there has to be a demonstration of ethical behaviour. And all of these are requirements of good governance. Now, the realms of corporate and project governance. Corporate governance is all-encompassing. Projects operate within that. At the corporate level, however, strategy is formulated And then it needs to be delivered, as Claudia mentioned. So the strategy has to be delivered. It is handed across to operations for ongoing performance of the organisation and delivery of that strategy. The strategy delivery arm, part of the organisation, is the management of projects in all its forms, portfolio, program and project management. An important linking area in terms of the governance is sponsorship. Sponsors are normally part of the permanent organisation. They are ideally executives with sufficient credibility and power as a link in the governance. And they need to provide that link between the temporary organisation, the projects which will at some point in time finish, and the ongoing operations. So we can think about overall corporate governance, and within that, a concept of project governance. And the Association for Project Management, in particular, has done some work on the governance of management of projects, which is actually governing the way in which you do manage projects within the organisation, which is a slightly different concept from the governance of the project, however large it may be, that you are working on. So just to distinguish between corporate and project governance, I became very interested in governance because it is something, it's a term, it's a concept which has only come into use both in the corporate world and the world of projects, probably in about the last 20 years. We had all of the things in place before that. We didn't necessarily refer to it as governance. But with the major corporate collapses and so on, reaching back somewhat 20 years or so, it has definitely come into focus. So there is a very strong similarity between the two, corporate and project governance. They are not the same thing, because in corporate governance, you're concerned with the objectives of the organisation. In project governance, you're concerned with defining the objectives of the projects. But there's a great similarity there. In terms of corporate governance, it's about defining the relationships between management, the board, shareholders and other stakeholders. Project governance is defining the relationship between the project's management, the project's parent organisation, the client or owner and other stakeholders. And this is based very much on the OECD's definition of corporate governance. Now, key issues in all of this are control or compliance, or both. And I noted the very strong control functions that were part of the models that John Quirk presented. Direction and leading are vital. Managing relationships, the many relationships is also vital. Decision making is important, and so is ethics. Project governance is initiated under the umbrella of corporate governance or contractual arrangements. But in any case, even where there are contractual arrangements, there will be a number of organisations all with their own corporate governance arrangements, and that has to be taken into consideration. In the private sector, project governance is seen as an enabler of corporate delivery capability. And it is concerned primarily in the private sector with shareholder interests. In the public sector, stakeholder interests, that broader term, is relevant. And it's about boundary management because you're working at the interface of public, private and community sectors. So you have a wide range of corporate governance structures that you need to deal with. So the key elements of project governance are that there is no single model. It is contextual. The fit has to be strategically designed to work with the organisation and the environment. And it sets ethical and methodological frameworks for dealing with accountabilities, strategic alignment, how you make decisions, roles and responsibilities, managing boundaries, controls and ethics. And you need transparent, repeatable, scalable principles, structures and processes, all things which have been raised in various ways by the previous speakers. You do need regular review and continuous improvement. Now, some of the issues are always bear in mind that project governance is under the umbrella of corporate governance, but it is not the same. It has to be designed to suit the project. You have to bear in mind that too many controls can be counterproductive and extremely expensive, increasing transaction costs. And hierarchical processes may not work for the project due to such things as urgency and stakeholders. So, as I say, bear in mind the costs, transaction costs, contracting, monitoring and controlling, reporting and information costs. Now, I was very pleased to see that John referred to values, because a lot of the descriptions of project and corporate governance do not raise values. But if in fact there had been, I'm sure that Enron had very good corporate governance processes in place. What they didn't have was an ethically based and sound shared value system. So that is absolutely important. And you appoint a governor or governing body for a project, whether it's a steering committee or a sponsor. You define roles, accountabilities, decision-making processes, and coordinate relationships, your planning and control, in order to serve the interests of stakeholders, which includes shareholders. Now, corporate governance in organisations happens up there in the stratosphere. The C-suite, the leaders set the strategy. They see that as their province. And it has to be implemented through a whole lot of projects and programs. So here we look at the relationship between your organisational project management capability, your strategy, and what is happening in projects. What normally happens is that that link is not clear. If you do not have good governance in place, good reporting processes and so on, such as John described, then there is this cloud, this area. So it is important that at the top, so they don't go to jail, the leaders need to have enough information to know what's happening. And that can be provided by good project governance. So you can disperse the cloud by introducing and making sure that you have good project governance. And that will be supported by your organisational project management capability. So, and there is a two-way support, as I mentioned at the start. Now, what I'm going to do is provide some evidence from the public sector. Because in these mega super galaxy projects, as John pointed out, government, the public sector is very much involved. No matter if you think your project is a private sector project, you still have to deal with the public sector in order to get your approvals and things of that sort. So what I've got here is case studies, just in the form of some quotes from research that we did for a social housing organisation, one involved in community and disability services, one in public infrastructure and in roads and highways. And bearing in mind that for these very large projects, public and private sectors share many challenges. They are often in partnership. Private contractors have been contracted to undertake the work, and the private sector has to satisfy government regulations and other stakeholder concerns. So they have shared challenges. They need to satisfy multiple stakeholders by demonstrating accountability and transparency, while, in the case of the public sector, implementing policy, in the case of the private sector, implementing strategy. They both have to utilise resources effectively with focus on the right resources, and they have to deliver, in the case of the public sector, usually services, and in the private sector, products as well as services. The focus is, in both cases, on improvement of organisational performance, so what you are as an organisation able to produce, your ability to implement and to adapt to change. And the public sector is concerned with maintaining primarily public confidence. For the private sector, it's shareholder confidence. There is evidence of the support of organisational project management capability for governance in the public sector. The Australian National Audit Office states that good public sector governance is important to provide adequate accountability and to encourage improvement while satisfying control and compliance requirements. And at the end of the day, citizens will judge government not by its intentions, but by what it actually achieves. But the challenges of governance are not significantly different from private enterprise. In the public sector, the shareholders, market analysts and the like will judge performance by the strategy delivered, not by the good intentions of the strategy you declare. There are common issues, resource shortages. It is a complex multi-stakeholder environment. There are competing objectives, and in the public sector in particular, but even for the private sector, there is a political arena. In government, project people in government are constantly being impacted by requests from the minister relating to their project work, particularly when it hits the front pages of the newspapers. Something that ministers usually don't like to have happen unless they have specifically planned it for their own profile. There are some common themes. One of these is commitment and attitude. What I discovered in working and looking into projects in the government sector is that there is a strong public sector ethos. There's an ethic in the public sector. There is actually a feeling amongst many of the people in the public sector that what they are doing is for the good of society, is for the good of the community, is to help people. And so there are very many good people in government, some of the best, who are not there for the money, but they are there because of the nature of the work, as are many people in projects generally. So evidence of organisational project management capability supporting governance in the public sector, I've identified as coming under these headings: accountability and transparency, control and compliance, risk management, consistent delivery, predictability, ensuring value for money, and actually engaging stakeholders, having effective stakeholder engagement. So I've got a few quotes here, which I'm not going to read through all of them. I might read through the odd one just to give you a little bit of time to read it for yourself. But the key points are here. The quotes merely illustrate and provide evidence that I'm just not making this up. This is actually drawn from practitioners in the workplace. So accountability and transparency. Organisational project management capability provides sound processes and reporting systems. That is good organisational project management capability. Audits and reviews are again something which is facilitated by this, and sponsorship is a key governance role. As we all know, if senior management is not showing an interest, it isn't going to really happen. So getting that buy-in is important in the public sector as it is elsewhere. In terms of control and compliance, in the public sector, you are operating under scrutiny. Of course, in the private sector, you are as well. The nature of that scrutiny is slightly different. The threat of media coverage is probably a great deal stronger in the public sector. Because people's jobs are reliant upon votes. It's important to have control and compliance in order to manage and meet expectations. So actually setting and meeting expectations is vitally important. Control and compliance give you the opportunity to monitor performance in terms of time and cost expectations, what you're delivering, the value you're delivering, and the satisfaction of both clients and users. And there is evidence that project management or good organisational project management capability gives much better governance and much better control. Direct quote. In terms of risk management, in the public sector, the theme that I came across in talking to people was that they really need, that the value of organisational project management capability and project governance was in keeping everything on major projects under the media radar. There's a tendency for governance to be particularly risk averse because they're dealing with public money, and they know that they're going to be caught up by the media if they don't have that fully under control. And the risk of media attention is a particular risk in its own right that has to be specifically managed. Consistency in delivery. Organisational project management capability enhances the ability to deliver consistently. And predictability is something else. And predictability, again, is something that is very much desired and required in these mega galaxy projects. In the government, they have longer-term external clients. Their client base doesn't necessarily change a great deal. They have also scrutiny from Treasury, and therefore they need to always be able to deliver value, or they may in fact be restructured out of existence. So there's a vital personal issue that individuals experience there. They have to ensure value for money. But it is delivery of benefits, not costs, that are the major driver. At the end of the day, it is the benefits, which are so much harder to measure and bring to account, that are vital in the public sector. But it's becoming increasingly that way in the private sector. So managing expectations and delivery of public value is more important than cost reduction. Stakeholder engagement. Absolutely vital on all major projects. In terms of the government, you're dealing with stakeholders, public, private, community sectors. There are very complex relationships of a political and otherwise nature. And so what you need to have, and you can move towards with good organisational project management capability, is enhanced ownership and engagement amongst those stakeholders. And having those people on board is vital to success. So, in conclusion, in the government context, the kinds of challenge that were faced in all of the cases of organisations that we spoke to here was resource shortages. That is a common thing across all projects, large and small, is actually having the talent. And I'm very pleased to hear of the good efforts that John talked about in terms of talent management, talent development. But resource is one of the most intractable aspects of delivering projects, is having the right resources when you need them. And I think as a community, we have failed to consistently do that over the last 20 years under the pressures of economic rationalism. There is a common multi-stakeholder, a complex multi-stakeholder environment that we have to deal with, competing objectives, the permeability of boundaries between administration and politics in the government sector is very challenging. Also, the impact of political decisions and changes and electoral rounds. I've mentioned before, and it just was a very strong theme, media attention. But as I said, there is this common theme of dedicated, committed staff who really believe in the work that they're doing in the public sector. Doesn't apply to all, but there are, I can assure you, very good people in there who care. Evidence from the public sector demonstrates that organisational project management is of value in supporting governance requirements, specifically around accountability and transparency, removing the cloud, making the line of sight fit for purpose, and moving directly in. Control and compliance, managing risk, being consistent and predictable in delivery, being able to do good estimates to begin with on very large mega projects is hugely challenging. Crystal balls, we wish that they were accurate. And stakeholder engagement is another common theme. And that brings me to a close. Thank you very much.